Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Courtney McVeigh, and I am the owner of the Divorce Resource Center of Georgia. I have gotten a lot of questions during this social distancing and shelter in place time for not only Georgia, but across the country. And because our organization provides all of your non legal needs, um, I often partner with my legal colleagues to fill in the gap of some of that information. And one of my favorites is here with us today, and that is Debbie Finch. And I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, Courtney. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this. It's really a pleasure to sit and speak with you and see you. My name is Debbie Finch, and I practice law in Athens and the surrounding circuits. The areas of the law that I practice in are mainly family law, but adoption law, and I do a lot of guardian ad litem work as well. So
And
lots of questions have come up since this pandemic was declared, I think, by the World Health Organization back in early March sometime. And since that time, there's obviously been lots of questions and concerns with people in the legal community, and also, litigants and folks who are having family law struggles and, maybe in crisis. So I appreciate you doing this, and hopefully this will be helpful to some folks out there.
I hope so, because you and I both know with the type of families that we work with, a pandemic is just going to add to a lot of crises that are already occurring in the family
Right,
when there's high conflict. So I appreciate
right.
what
Yeah.
you're doing. And I just want to tell everybody that I kind of feel like you're a social worker trapped in a lawyer's body.
I feel like that too. I feel like that too. Because that's what it is, especially with the guardian ad litem work, because you and I work with the same folks, the people who are in crisis, and you help them deal with that, and hopefully, we just try to get them through it and their families through it as best we can.
Well, let's just jump right into it. I know I have some questions that I've already been asked by clients that I didn't really know the answer to. So I'm going to pick your brain right now for my own well-being and the well-being of and the information for those that are watching. So the first question that I have is, can you get a divorce right now?
That's a little tricky because
Mhm.
so the courts are pretty much closed except for essential matters. The judicial A judicial emergency was declared in March, around March the 13th, through April the 13th. That was extended a couple of days ago by Justice Melton, and so basically the courts are only hearing matters that are essential, which those involve people who are in custody. They're hearing bond hearings and emergency matters related to family law. There are some hearings that are occurring in juvenile court as well, and some mental health commitment hearings, which usually that's out of probate court. But the courts are really limiting to what they're hearing. So if it's an uncontested matter, I think it's just you take it on a judge by judge basis. But if it's uncontested and everybody's in agreement, then the likelihood is that if your attorney, if it's submitted to the court, that the court will likely, sign off on it, because the judges are working. They just have, new restrictions and new rules they're trying to deal with. So no, everything is pretty much on hold unless it is an emergency matter. People can still file for divorce. There's still e-filing. Lawyers are e-filing, but as far as requesting non-emergency hearings, it's unlikely that will be scheduled. I know most of my hearings have been put off until well, they've been continued. I don't know when they'll be reset at this point. Certainly, sometimes, in all likelihood, after May the 14th, which is when the judicial order is extended to right now, but it may be extended beyond that, as we all know. Who knows what's going to happen? That was a
That's
long
great.
answer. Sorry.
No, that's great information, because there are so many other variables that you have to consider that even a simple sounding question may not have a simple answer right now. The follow-up that I have to what you said is, when a family's in crisis, there are things that feel like an emergency to them. And so when it comes to what would qualify for an emergency hearing in, let's say, a custody situation, can you share any examples of what, just maybe in your opinion, could be something that the court would consider hearing? The first thing that comes to my mind is a question I've already gotten, and that is some valid concern that one parent is not practicing safe enough measures in terms of sheltering in place um,
Right.
and social distancing, particularly when it comes to children.
So I think different courts will look at that differently. I mean, different judges will have their own perspective, what rises to the level of an emergency. Um, but I do think that if it's just, well, I don't think, my child should go right now because there's this pandemic in place. That won't suffice. And in fact, if you look at the governor's order that he entered, well, he entered the first order the other day, but then he immediately amended it to make sure to include language that says this in no way will authorize a person to restrict visitation. I mean, you are to go by the orders that you have in place by the Superior Court judge as far as visitation goes in custody cases. So they were very specific that no one wants someone denying visitation or contact because of the pandemic. Now, I think you have to, of course, look at every situation differently. And if a child is in imminent danger or there's concern that the child will be, harmed by the visit, then I think that rises to the level of an emergency. So what does that look like? I mean, what I would suggest to people is, if your child has some sort of medical condition, then perhaps you need to have a conversation with your child's pediatrician. And also, try your best to have a conversation with the other parent, because obviously, both parents, hopefully, the most important thing in their world is their child, and neither will want to do anything that will put their child in harm's way. So I think, that's probably just having those conversations is going to be really important. But, you may not be able to come to an agreement on it. And in those situations, reach out to your child's pediatrician, involve the other parent in it as much as possible, and try to come up maybe with alternatives to, one-on-one visits if that's appropriate. And they can do that by agreement. But I guess to go back to your original question, I mean, the orders that are in place, or the governor's order specifically states that in no way should anyone use this to deny visitation or to go outside of any kind of court order as to visitation.
But it almost sounds like in order to remedy that, if that is happening in your situation, that you may have to wait till the courts open back up to use legal remediation for something like that happening.
Well, the courts are hearing emergency matters. And if a child is at risk of imminent harm because of the conduct of a parent, if the other parent says, forget it, I'm not going to social distance, I'm going to do what I've always done.
Mhm.
And, I'm going to go pick up my child, and we're going to go, wherever. I don't know what's open that you can go to, but we're not going to take the safety precautions or the safety measures that are basically ordered at this point by the governor. So if a person is going to just absolutely disregard that, then I think that puts it in a different category than, I'm really concerned, and, I don't want to send my child because I don't want to have to travel. I don't want him to travel to the other location, or, that sort of thing. I think you have to have, a good factual basis for it.
Okay. And
So
get that,
if that makes sense.
backing of another professional who shares
If you
maybe
can,
that
and you may
level of
not be
concern.
able to do that, that might be difficult, but
Mhm.
I do think if a child has some special needs, that really is going to put it into a different category also. And there's ways, and I'm sure you have suggestions of how people can, um, I don't know, accommodate each other has to visitations in the event that you can't do the one-on-one visitation. There's all sorts of resources. I mean, we're using one today with the teleconferencing, and that's something for folks to consider. But there's other things that the parents can do to just, continue that contact, even though it may not be one-on-one. But having said that, if folks have an order, that's what they're supposed to be following, unless, and I won't say unless, that's what they're supposed to be following. And if the child is, if there's one party's concerned and it rises to the level of an emergency, then they can certainly seek the help of the court in those situations.
Outside of an emergency, do co-parents have a right to know where the other parent has been in terms of making their own choices about whether or not to have in-person contact and to with their children, even if that maybe, let's say, a non-custodial parent sees their child every other weekend and they don't know what their child's been exposed to, and maybe the conflict is so high there's not good communication with the co-parent to begin with. What kinds of things would you suggest for someone in that situation?
I mean, these are the things we deal with all the time. I mean, the first thing I suggest is communicate, but that's tricky, and especially when you're dealing with high conflict cases. Um, but that's what you're left with, really. I mean, you have to communicate, and even if the other person doesn't respond, you put forth that effort. And it's also tricky if there's been domestic violence in the past, or there have been restraining orders between the individuals, because that leads to other concerns. Well, why do you want to know where I'm at? That sort of thing. So it is very tricky. There's no hard and fast rule about it. I just think you just have to remember that whatever you say or whatever you write may be, exhibit one if you're in court down the road, and you want to be the person who's, reasonable. I mean, even if you're not going to be in court, you want to be the person who's reasonable about it. And so you can probably make those inquiries in a general friendly way, for the best. But who knows? I mean, who knows how that will be met by the other person? I guess it just all goes to their history. I mean, do you have suggestions how folks might approach that with another person that they've probably been in conflict or litigation with?
Absolutely. I think it goes back to what you said about getting the professional advice too. I think during this time right now, even though we are kind of operating on a lot of uncertainty, both financially, both, on so many different local, state, and federal and global levels, there are some things that apply to crisis situations and that are universal when it comes to communication. I know at our agency, we try to provide all your non-legal needs. So not only like emotional support, but in this case, this would be a great role for a parent coordinator to engage in, help mediate some of that communication between the parents. We do already have that going on. We've actually done virtual supervised visitation already.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, because it really is, I think the positive of how we're doing it with the virtual is that it's also very parallel and similar to how we're doing our virtual therapy sessions. We still do play therapy with children virtually. And we've been doing lots and lots of research on how to keep the children engaged. And that is very easily translated into making a meaningful virtual visit with a non-custodial parent, as well as things that you can use later for like FaceTime opportunities that are typically court-ordered as well. So just really relying on the experts right now, I think is going to be really important for everybody. There's a lot of information out there, and it's hard to sift through. So I would also, and I find myself doing this too, I would also say kind of like find a primary resource and stick with it if it covers most of your needs, because it can feel very overwhelming to read 10 different articles from 10 different people and 10 different opinions about what you're trying to get help with.
So is your office right now, are you seeing new clients coming in? Are you accepting new clients at this point, or,
Mhm.
during the pandemic? Because that's a great resource for folks when they're having these conflicts, to have someone who can kind of referee things, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely. I mean, people need connection now more than ever. And if that needs to be virtual, and then we're here for you. It's been very important to us to have a very smooth transition to virtual services. I am a little bit old school, and so there was a part of me that felt resistance to that. I'm like, oh, it's not going to be the same. But I found many positives actually, such as being able to access services quicker as well. So instead of having to wait for the next available office appointment, many of I know my providers and my team are working much more flexible schedules now that they can at home. The other benefit is that our program is something that is based in Athens in the Northeast Georgia area, but we can serve all of Georgia. And so now that I've got some telehealth providers, we could start services for someone in another geographic area of the state, and they can maintain the virtual services even after we're able to get back to in-person opportunities.
So if you have a person, because I've dealt with this a couple of times since the pandemic has been in place, but I've had a parent who lives in Georgia and who has children out of state, and they are looking for a family therapy resource. I mean, is that something that your office or that you are continuing to do, or that you are continuing to do basically during this pandemic?
Absolutely. It really has brought a whole new opportunity for people that maybe just was not on the forefront of their minds before, even among professionals. So that's a great example of how we could serve the family. Right now, during the pandemic, there are some loosening of restrictions for licensed providers like myself, a licensed clinical social worker or a licensed psychologist or a licensed professional counselor. In normal times, you have to be licensed in the state where the client is at, and that's the primary client. So, but right now that's loosened. How long that will stay that way, I don't know. But if, let's say that the primary client receiving the family therapy is the parent or non-custodial parent, and they are in the state of Georgia, and the children are in a different state, then that we can still provide that service because the primary client is in the state of Georgia. And the insurance companies, although they have their own issues, but for the most part, they've been really helpful in being able to reimburse even these telehealth sessions. It was already a movement that was started for lots of valuable reasons way sooner than this. It's just become more mainstream right now. So on our end, we can bill insurance for those sessions as well.
So this may be a game changer after these health concerns are lifted, as far as, the COVID-19. It sounds like this is something, telehealth and teletherapy may be something that people are utilizing more and more, because it seems so accessible. Like you said, you don't have to, make an appointment and go into an office. You're there basically if you have a computer and internet connection. So
Right. I've actually had an appointment with my doctor already, telehealth, that was I've been able to get in touch with my own medical doctor quicker than normal right now too. So I think it is going to ease a lot of access to services that maybe just because there was a thinking of we've just always done it this way, that was present before, will be lifted moving forward.
okay, so maybe that's a tiny silver lining in all of this. I mean, it's hard to find silver linings in this.
Well,
If
and
there,
that's
you
going to be your best
hesitate to say
coping
that word.
skill. Yeah, that's going to be your best coping skill right now, is finding those silver linings. And it may sound cliche, but there's actually a field, a theoretical approach to therapy called positive psychology. And a lot of it is based in focusing on gratitude and focusing on the positive aspects of any given situation. There's also a lot of spiritual connotation to that approach as well. And so whatever works for you, to be able to, we use the word reframe or just shift your focus, then I guarantee you will find some positives. I love the story. My favorite story to share about this is from the book The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. And
Yes,
you're familiar with that. So she was, I think she was German. Was she German?
I believe that's right. Yeah.
During the Nazi occupation, and she hid Jewish families. Her and her family hid Jewish families in their basement, and they were caught. And as a teenager or a young adult, she was sent to concentration camps, and she survived. And one of the things a story that she tells is in her book, The Hiding Place, is that in their bunker in the concentration camp, it was flea infested. And she was a very devout Christian, and she and her sister would pray for the things that were happening and try to find that gratitude. And even if it didn't seem like it, they would try to find some ounce of being thankful. And once she was out of that, she looked back on that experience and realized that the Nazi soldiers, hardly ever came into their bunker, and it was because of the fleas. And so she actually
Wow.
credits that with surviving and being thankful for the fleas. So we don't always know the connection of what one seemingly negative event could lead to. And so that's why I say I guarantee you can find something positive. If Corrie ten Boom can find a way to be thankful for the fleas, we can find one too.
That's great. That's a great story. That's a great story. And I think it helps if people kind of limit their access to social media too. I know, you find that you're on it more and more.
Yeah.
But I've also just noticed here lately that there seems to be a lot of conflict on social media just amongst the posts. And I don't
Right.
know, I don't know if you have suggestions about that, because I know people are at home now, and there's a lot of time is on social
Yes.
media. And how do you deal with all that? I mean, what's the
Well,
best way?
it's a blessing and a curse. And if you haven't already set some boundaries in your life around social media, now is a great time to start.
Yeah, amen. Yeah,
So, personally, I actually don't have a lot of negativity on my social media because I set those boundaries a long time ago, probably
that's
around
smart.
the last big election. Those
Right.
boundaries got set. So you can. There's so many options on social media. I know sometimes we're drawn to drama and conflict, but it's really more important that we are self-protective from it and know that even if it gets us jazzed up to get in a debate, it may not actually be good for you right now. Um, and so some boundaries are meant to be fluid. And when there's more stressors in your life, you want to put up more of a brick wall to triggers or possible triggers. You've got a lot of stability and your self-care is good and things are really calm, then put up a picket fence. That's okay. And so you want to decide what your boundaries are based on the levels of protection that you need based on the variables in your life. So right now, if you're feeling really fragile and really raw, I would encourage you to be more limiting of your time on social media, because really what we put in our mind is what's going to be our focus. So you can have control over your thought life, and you can have control over being able to shift your focus when it does get off track, so that you can tap into self-care and you can feel joy right now, even in the midst of everything that's going on. But I would say number one thing with social media is just boundaries.
Yeah,
And
that's
that,
great advice. That is great advice for folks going through all this. So
yeah, yeah. So, in terms of being able to navigate this right now, is just to kind of sum up what it feels like we've kind of chatted about. You're going to need support. Don't try to do this alone. um, and you're also going to need um, some patience with the process, and understanding that we're all trying to figure this out together, and there's going to be some mistakes along the way. um,
right.
there's positive things to focus on, for sure, in any given situation. And there may be more positive things to come as a result of going through all this together. Um, let's, and I think too, the last thing that I know that I've encouraged a lot of my clients is that there is going to be some increased planning that's going to be necessary, in particular with the visitation or FaceTiming. and any supplemental kind of virtual things you're needing to do. Just like today, you and I have had chats outside a courtroom, or at community events, and we're having a chat today, but we did a little bit more planning than usual to know what we were going to talk about. And I think that rule of thumb applies to for having interactions and having meaningful interactions in a virtual world. It's just planning ahead. I'm going to be posting another video later of some great tips for how to do that for parents. So that will be coming soon, is how to have some meaningful virtual time with your kids.
Oh, that's great. I'll definitely share that on my page, because that's a wonderful resource. And yeah, and just to add to that too, it's just try to cut people some slack as much as you can, and be kind. And probably the word of the day for me, and is to refrain. I mean, that's a great practice, even just to learn to refrain, and perhaps, take less offense at things. If the other parent says or does something, just to, kind of take a deep breath and before you react to it, because
Right.
it is trying times. And I know that people have very real fears about, well, what if I send my child, because the other parent has a different parenting style, he's not, or she's not, has concerned about social distancing, or about, or just is not has on top of things. One parent may feel that way, and so it is stressful for them. But sometimes you just have to kind of trust the process also. I mean, you
Yes.
have these court orders to guide you, and you just do the best you can with it. But yes, planning is key as far as visitation, scheduling time, virtual visits, telephone visits, all of those things are still there. And hopefully they can manage the one-on-one visit, because that's important. But there's a lot of resources out there if they can't. So anyway,
Absolutely.
that's my
and
suggestion.
and you and I both are rely a lot on our community resources, and so we have a resource page on our website at divorceresourcecenterofgeorgia.com. And after this call, I'm going to get Debbie to give me a list of her favorite resources. We've already got some on there, so go ahead and check it out. And I'm going to be adding a lot more specific to what's going on now as well. We're also, I know on our end, I am increasing my social media presence for the organization, because there is more of a need right now. So you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at DRC of GA. And I jumped the Twitter bandwagon, and we're on that too now.
Oh, great.
At Center Divorce, but just Divorce Resource Center of Georgia, and you'll find us. I want to thank you, Debbie, so much for taking the time out of your day to come and chat with us and chat with me. And
This was fun. This was fun, and I appreciate you so much, Courtney, for what you've done, because you really have made such a huge impact on the family law community in Athens and the surrounding area by the resource center that you've created, and just putting these things out there for folks. And because there just wasn't a lot out there before you came along, so I've been thrilled to be able to watch that, and I appreciate you so much for that. So thank you for letting me join you, and I hope to do another one of these again with you at some point. And I appreciate you very much.
Well, thank you so much. You were my first cheerleader, so I will take that to heart. All right, take care, Debbie.
Okay, you too. Bye bye.
Bye.